Hi, I'm Jim Tolles, and today I want to talk about the multiple layers of healing. Healing is one of those things that this culture, this world is in dire need of, and it's healing on the many different levels of us. And the reason I'm saying multiple layers is I really want people to start to build an understanding of healing as a multiple layer thing, as not just something that happens in between the ears. And a lot of times people try to heal just through their minds, like somehow if they just can understand it or think about it in a new way and talk about it, that they've done the whole of healing. Now those are really, really important pieces. But the heart and the body heal in their own ways. And then there's things on the level of the psychic and energetic plane that heal in other ways as well. And all of those need to be honored to come through a full healing cycle. A lot of people turn to the spiritual path precisely because all the current modalities of healing, or at least the more accepted ones, are failing. They're failing in some way. And so they're looking for something even more pure, more clean, or more deep dive. They're looking for something. They don't even know what. They just know that they need to heal. And so they turn to spirituality, and they turn to energy healing, and they turn to God. And they just keep turning to something in this kind of hope for healing. Ultimately, the deepest healing happens, it happens within you. It happens within that deep surrender of your body and within union inside yourself. And so the union is the dissolving of the difference between the healthy part of you and the unhealthy part. you know and so mentally this can be like when you start to admit something difficult that happened, that you had a difficult childhood, perhaps you were beaten a lot growing up, you know coming into acceptance that not only was that inappropriate, right? Because sometimes people start, well, my dad was just making me tough so I could live in the life. It's like when you start to come into that awareness and you unlock that, and you unlock that thought pattern, you start to say, no, this is actually really damaging for me, and I've carried these burdens, and I've become a violent person because of these thoughts, and this is no longer appropriate for me. To be able to think about that, to allow yourself that thinking, is the first level of healing. And so this is where, like, a lot of psychologists are wonderful, or psychiatrists can help you get into that space, right? That's really, they're kind of mind healers in many respects. And I don't mean to be diminutive, and there's a lot of different psychiatrists and psychologists out there. But that's where the primary focus tends to be. It doesn't tend to say, I want to work with the heart and body the same way. I'm sure there's some more pioneering ones that do, and there's lots of techniques. I'm not saying I know all about that discipline. But what I am saying is, like, where that primary focus tends to be. And we tend to use the kind of our heads as access to our hearts. Like somehow we can just kind of think our way. It's like, well, I forgive him. It's like, do you? Then you see him again and you're just absolutely enraged and mad and you want to beat the hell out of him. Obviously you haven't forgiven on that next level down. Because in the heart level, how that heals and how that speaks is through emotion. So it may need, like, a way to emotionally express a lot of this. Maybe it is with, like, your father, maybe not. This is just kind of the metaphor I'm going for with today, this example. Because the heart's going to move in a different way, and it's going to move on its own time. So a lot of people know this through, like, grieving, like if somebody dies in the family, that your heart, it opens up and heals and grieves in its own way and in its own time, that you can't force that. Conceptually, you may actually be okay with somebody passing away. But when somebody does die, there's a certain level of acceptance and healing that has to happen in the level of the heart. And then even in the body, because you can feel really out of sorts, during, like, the grieving process, like physically, your body's just kind of off, it's no real way to explain it. But that's because the body's going through kind of its own grieving and this kind of adjustment. And I kind of felt through those cycles with the passing of my grandfather earlier this year. It wasn't unexpected, and it wasn't like, a huge traumatic thing for me, but I could feel the different levels, like intellectually, it was very easy for me to understand that, but like in the heart and body, there are certain ways where just something like, whoa, you know, or I could feel like the sadness would just kind of arise in my chest, and I would just breathe into it. And that was easy enough for me to kind of release because he'd led a good life. I was already very okay with it, and there's lots of run up to that. Other relationships are different, right? Where somebody dies unexpectedly, that can be a lot more difficult. And then, you have to go through each level of that clearing, where it's like, okay. Going back to the more traumatic issue, especially for somebody who's had any sort of physical violence done to them. There's a lot of healing that has to happen in the level of the body, because the body stores these memories. It stores it in emotion, it stores it in pain, and just inflexibility, and all these different things get caught in different places. And this seems completely ridiculous until you've actually had a clearing happen on that level, and then you know what I'm talking about. Right now it's just, what is he talking about? How is it in your body? It's like, it happened like years ago. Shouldn't we be here and now all the time? Yes. But nonetheless, we've become like pack rats for experiences and identities and grudges and fears and sadnesses. And so we are carrying on all this crap in our heads and our hearts and our bodies. And, for people that are more sensitive on the psychic level, that sensitivity kind of brings with it this kind of natural collecting of energetic crap around you. So you've got all these different things tied around you. And so what you do is you start coming through, you start cutting those cords and figuring out what they are and clearing that space out. And that's an important thing to do. It becomes more important for different people at different times. And so this is another thing that, I want to encourage, like, you can't rush the healing process. It's going to come at different times, and it's going to need different tools. You really can't just keep using like one tool all the time. Like the journal that I always talk about constantly, is a great way to start to express yourself. You can start to write down, this is what happened, this is the situation, this is how I felt about it. And maybe that becomes a heart opening for you, or maybe not, right? It just depends on your heart and what you need. And so maybe the next step becomes telling a close friend about a situation that was very difficult. I often talk about massage work. It's one of the great doorways into bodies, to help the body start to release this thing, start to understand that whatever happened, whatever thing that's carrying it can now let go. And it's a really, really important thing for the body to let go. And when it does that, an amazing thing kind of happens where you have all this, clearing this flexibility. You start to feel yourself in a new way. And it's such a wonderful and freeing sense. And I think that's another core thing about healing, is when you're really doing the work, there's this sense of growing freedom, this growing spaciousness, this growing sense of love that you have within you. And you start to realize that you had no idea that you were in so much pain. I mean, that's where most people are. And, if you're reading this, maybe you're in that space right now where you don't realize how much pain you're carrying because you've never looked. But just if you're now realizing that, that's a beautiful thing. To have that realization, like, I haven't looked, but I'm looking now. If you're listening to this video, you're starting to look now. And just be with it. Right? This is where we have to start to let go of judgments about, this is bad, this is a bad experience. I mean, those judgments are part of what keep us in pain, because they don't allow us to really heal. So you can't even think of like whatever happened as good or bad. It's just what happened. And there's pain, and there's difficulty, and it's time to release it. Because when you get into the good and bad, you get into the blame game, and the blame game doesn't help anybody. It doesn't mean you don't have people be accountable for the things that they've done in their life or done to you. Okay? And that's part of love. Love is very, very accountable. It says, this was not something that you should have done. You should not have beaten me as a child. This is wrong. But you're not really getting caught up in like trying to demonize somebody and say you're a horrible person for it and whatever. It's like, actually, the deeper you drop in the space, the more compassion you have, because you start to see what happened to this other individual and why they would actually do that to you. A lot of it is because they're carrying so much pain that they're trying to, get rid of their pain to somebody else. I mean, that's the cycle of a lot of humanity. A lot of humanity is just trying to get rid of the sense of disease, discomfort, and pain. So that they're always throwing it on somebody else. We're throwing crap on each other and just doing enormous amounts of hurt to each other. And so how you break that cycle is you do start to look at how you've been doing that, how you've been throwing pain on others. And you won't want to do it after a while. You'll start to see like how uncomfortable it is, and how in so doing you're actually keeping yourself locked in the cycle of pain. And so you come to that space of healing. And in coming to that space of healing, the main message for this particular video, and I'll talk about healing a lot more in others, is that you have to heal on every level. Every level needs healing. Every level needs healing in something else. And I can't encourage you enough to do it with a space of love and compassion for yourself. That you're not a bad person, whether you've been raped, been seriously injured in some way, have seriously injured somebody else, have raped somebody else. Like, all level of these things need healing, and all level of these things can be healed. There's nothing out there that can't be, no matter how bad it seems. So, with these ideas I share with you today, I hope they're helpful. Once again, my name is Jim Tolles. You can find more of my work at spiritualawakeningprocess.com. Have a beautiful day.